Alright guys, welcome back to the video. So in today's video, we are finishing the blanket chest. All we have left to do is to get the lid fully cleaned up, get the hinges mounted on it, get it attached to the case, get some finish on it, and then everything else is done. This has been one of those projects that's just kind of dragged on, so I'm getting really excited to be done with it and be moving on to the next thing very quickly here. Okay, so I'm going to use the track saw real quickly here to just knock off these extended breadboard ends, the areas that we had left extra on there. But real quickly, I wanted to check the lid against the actual case to see if I wanted to change anything up, and I'm glad I did that because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to narrow this board by about a ½ inch on either side or an inch overall. Because originally my plan was to have the back end of the lid kind of protruding off the back of the case. We're going to add in a spacer piece, all that kind of stuff, so the lid was sitting a little bit up and at an angle. But as I was kind of thinking about it, I would much rather have this lid sitting nice and flat, you know, right on the case here. So when I make it so this back edge is flush with that back edge of the case, we have about 2 3/16 of an inch hanging over the front edge. Now compared to the sides where we have about 13/16 of an inch overhanging, that front edge is just way too much material there. So if I take 1 inch off the width of this panel, it means we're going to have 1 3/16 of an inch lip on the front edge that you'll actually lift up on to open the chest here. Oh, the track scissors are just freaking awesome. I need another hand. Okay, so I just kind of zoned out there and got everything done. All that's left to do is to put some oil on the lid and then we can call it a day. So when you're building a chest like this, you have a lot of different options for when you don't want your lid to go flopping backwards. So on the first blanket chest I built, I didn't put anything like this on it to restrain the lid. And for me that works because where I have that chest, it's sitting right in a corner up against a wall, so when I open the lid, I just lean the lid against the wall. It's not that big of a deal, but in most cases, with a blanket chest like this, you want to do something to restrain the lid so that it doesn't just flop all the way open. Because if this chain wasn't here, this lid would flop back and it would rip the hinges right out of all the pieces of wood. Now this is a very traditional method, using a chain or a piece of rope or something going between the lid and the box to prevent it from opening. There's also some more modern solutions. I know Rockler has these like weird torsion hinges. I was hoping to add 2 chains, but this was the last one that Lee Valley had. If this chain does get ripped out, or if I just find that's a little bit too floppy, then I can just order the other chain from Lee Valley, or I can wait till they come back in stock, and I can just install it on the other side too. The other thing I added in is stops for the tray. So with the tray on the track here, you can see that if I push it all the way to the left, we stop about 3/4 of an inch away from the wall. Same thing on this side, we're stopping about 3/4 of an inch away, and that's just making sure we don't jam the tray into these brass bits. So our oil on most of our pieces is getting pretty close to curing up. Now, one of the things I want to mention really quickly here, the reason I stick to using tried and true oils so much compared to using something like Osmo, Rubio, normal polyurethane, is because it takes a long time to dry. Now, this seems counterintuitive because typically with a finish, you want it to dry nice and quick so that stuff doesn't stick to it, all that kind of thing. But when you're using a natural oil finish like tried and true, it's not affected by, if it gets dust on it. I've had these pieces just sitting in the shop for a few days now. I have dust on the floor that I'm kicking up into the air. I was doing a bunch of sanding in that this morning, so there was a little bit of extra dust in the air, and that hasn't affected the finish whatsoever. The other part of it is that because it takes a while to dry, you can very easily go back in and clean up areas where you might have missed it when you were wiping off the excess. So some of my pieces here still have some spots that are a little bit oily, mostly like right in the grooves and right in the corners there. So all I'm gonna do now, before we do our kind of final assembly of the blanket chest here, I'm just gonna go rub them down and get rid of any of that possible excess oil. That way these will all dry and cure nicely. The reason I say this is a massive benefit is, especially like I experienced when I was building the maple bed with Osmo, is Osmo dries really, really quickly, within probably an hour, I would say. If you miss wiping a spot off or buffing an area, you're gonna get this spot that becomes a defect. The finish doesn't look good in that one spot, it might be a little bit more matte, or it might just turn into a splotch. Either way, it doesn't look very good. And the problem is the only way to fix that is to resand and then reapply. So it can become a very big nightmare. And like I found in that bed, you really have to take your time overall, just making sure you catch all these little small spaces, and checking everything, that it just takes so much longer to actually apply the finish. Whereas with tried and true, you apply it, we're only about 16 hours later, the oil is still a little bit wet. I still have the option to go and get rid of any excess or any splotches or any areas where I just missed wiping it off before. So that's the thing that I love about tried and true, is that because it takes a long time to dry, you get the option to fix your issues. The other part of it is, if I finish something with Osmo, I can't hand that to my customer the same day because it stinks. There's no guarantee that it's gonna look good when the finish dries. Overall, it's not a finish I want my customer to interact with within 24 to 48 hours. Whereas with tried and true, when I was going and doing farmers markets and that, I would finish a cutting board and then go and sell it at the same market, because as long as the oil has some time to soak in, it's gonna do its job, it's gonna be just fine, and there's no horrible smells or chemicals coming off of this piece of wood right now with the oil that's on it. It's just fine the way that it is. Well, that's a problem. Minor issue here. I was planning to just brad nail our bottom slats into the case here because they're pretty simple and gravity's always gonna be holding them down. Problem is, I can't get my brad nailer in close enough to actually line the nail up with our support brackets on the bottom there. So now I have one of two options. I can either put a screw in from the top down into our bracket, or I can go through the bracket and into the slat. Now on one hand, going from the underside is gonna look better because we're not gonna have a whole bunch of screws in the bottom of the chest here. So that would look better, but it's gonna be really dang hard to get our pieces to that nice spacing that we need in here. But on the other side, where we put a screw in through the top here, that means that we have to countersink a hole through our milk, which means we're probably gonna get some of that natural ash showing through around our screw, which is not ideal. So I think I'm gonna go with putting the screws in from the bottom because I really don't wanna look in this thing and just see, a line of screws going all the way across. That took about 100 times more effort than I thought it was going to. Initially, my thoughts that I could just use the brad nailer. It was like super simple, just a little brad here and there, it would all hold together but I mean, the screws are good too. We got nice even spacing between all of our slats now. But yeah, definitely I need to get a smaller brad nailers. And we now basically have every type of screw in this project. We've got flathead, we've got Phillips, we've got Robertson. The only one I don't have is Torx, but this is Canada and we don't like Torx screws, just like the Americans don't like Robertson screws for some reason. So anyway, all that's left to do now is to apply the last coat of finish to the lid. We're gonna get the leather glued into the tray, and then this will be completely done. So a minor hiccup, we can't actually use the contact cement that I have in the tray here like I was planning to, because apparently I didn't seal the can fully last time I used it. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to coat the bottom of the tray here with some Titebond, because an interesting fact that I found out when I was Googling what glues to use with leather is that Titebond was originally designed to be used to make leather drive belts. And I don't really need this piece of leather to be like perfectly held in place, I just need something to prevent it from, if I hold the tray upside down, from the leather from falling out. Okay, so there we go. The blanket chest is now completed, and I think it looks amazing. Having those green internal parts, awesome. The brass hardware, amazing. The little walnut dowels on the breadboard ends of the lid, absolutely beautiful. All around, I'm really happy with how this project came out. So for this project, there are a few things I would do differently. For one, I would be much more careful with my breadboard ends. When I'm drilling these holes on the inside here, I would do something that I would just make sure that I don't blow out the inside, because we do have some pretty gross looking areas. So I love the combination of materials in this project. We've got mainly cherry for the body. We've got these walnut dowels on the top. We've got that green painted ash on the inside. We've got some nice leather in there too, as well as all the brass hardware. It all works beautifully in conjunction with each other to kind of create some color gradients in that. So I think it works just beautifully well. So I'm gonna let this sit and let that oil kind of cure up for a few hours before I actually come out and do kind of the final footage, and you'll get some of the final beauty shots of this thing. But anyway, the next thing for you guys will be those glory shots, so I do hope you enjoyed it. This has been an awesome project so far. So as always guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.